So in my previous video about the aggregates, I was speaking about how the self-grasping releases during the awakening process in regards to each of the aggregates, and how that connects to the realization of non-duality and no self and emptiness. And in this video, I want to go into the transformation that we undergo at the level of the body-mind. So the experience of the aggregates undergoes a kind of alchemical process. And as a result, not only the aggregates are realized to be empty, but the experience is realized to be innately blissful. This empty nature. So if you haven't already had like a first-hand experience of this type of awakening, so the content of this video may not be relevant, or it may sound, I don't know, abstract. But yeah, you're welcome to listen to it nevertheless. It could sometimes be just inspiring for us to hear like different ways the awakened reality is described. So this is just one of them. And yeah, so I'll describe this transformation of the aggregates from the perspective of Chud again. So that was the framework I was using also in my previous video. So Chud is a practice method mainly, and I'm not going to go that much into it in this video, but I'll describe more this broader context of awakening and non-dual realization. So the experience of form, right? So that eventually transforms into something that in the context of Vajrayana is called the mirror-like wisdom. And that's very interesting correlation because what is essentially transformed there is anger or hatred, this specific wisdom energy. What it uses as a raw material is anger. And why is that related to form, Rupa? Well, because form is exactly that, which makes it appear as there is something that is other, fundamentally speaking, that there is a world, and in this world there is a self that we identify with, and that is constantly in a kind of threatening situation, existentially speaking, potentially under attacks. So this sense of existential unsafety and mistrust and perception that you are somehow something other than life or the world that you see around you. Well, that is created by form, because form makes it appear as if you are separate, that your body is separate from the environment, that your embodied experience is somehow like an individual unit, that your mind is separate, from the collective, that your emotions are something specific to you. So all of that is the functioning of the form aggregates. And all these kind of violent or dysfunctional situations that we have with others, the so-called others in our life, if you look closely into it, it is because the so-called other appears as a fixed form. They appear as an entity, as a person, as a human being with fixed qualities, like in a conventional sense. And in our mind, often they also take a very kind of fixed way of appearing. Like we see them in a very specific way through our own preconceptions and past experiences and meaning making interpretations. So every time anything, whether it's a person or even something more subtle, like a state of consciousness or awakening, even, you have an awakening breakthrough and it launches you into a very specific kind of way of experiencing. If anytime when anything appears to take a fixed form, that's Rupa. And that starts to create this kind of subtle existential hostility. It can be very, very subtle and very hard to detect, but it's basically like living in this kind of threat mode. And our nervous system is very much often attuned to that threat mode, like kind of being in a constant trauma response. Like living in a world where you are a target of potential attacks, or that you need to dominate the environment, to control, to manipulate it in order to survive. So it's this type of worldview. So when this aggregate is transformed through the realization of formlessness and no self, anatta, it becomes this mirror-like wisdom, this astonishing clarity, like astonishing vividness and clarity. So what previously appeared as an objective world outside there, as opposed to your interior subjective world, completely collapses into this indescribable, like non-dual experiencing that is totally empty, that is totally non-existent. But at the same time, it's very alive, it's very vibrant. And now you know that anything that appears as threatening is essentially an aspect of your own mind. It's nothing other than what you are. That essentially everything is just this vivid display of sensorial beauty. So often in the awakening process, when there happens a significant dissolution of a sense of self, of a sense of separate me, it results in certain experiential effects. And this clarity is one of them. So in this context, it kind of means that everything becomes kind of hyper real. Like all the colors are very clear and distinct and effulgent. Like the whole of reality around you is suddenly like peeled off from these distorted conceptual layers, and it allows this perception that is pure and very much alive. This experience of your body, your embodied experience, and environment now perceived as an indivisible whole. So again, it's an experiential byproduct. So it often appears when we digest conditioning, we digest karma, and the sense of separate self, it dissolves. So it results in this type of release. It comes with this type of clarity or bliss, or is this no mind, no thought state, or no mind state. But these are all experiential byproducts. And eventually they settle into something very, very subtle and ordinary and kind of imperceivable, kind of the extraordinary ordinariness. Okay, so that was the first aggregate. And the second aggregate is the feeling tone or Vedana. So the transformation we go here is also very profound, because this aggregate makes it appear that certain sensations appear as pleasurable or unpleasant or neutral. So what happens when we start to access increasingly more is unconditioned nature is that it kind of highlights this neutrality, like, which is very interesting. Neutrality that may appear like indifference, but it's not indifference, because indifference is something that is distant from the experience, that is usually a form of avoidance. But this is like closer than close. This is zero distance. This is like unconditional presence, but without any investment. So it's like full presence, total presence, but there's no sense of self about it. And it comes with a kind of neutrality, or stateless state, as it's sometimes called, because the experience of self, it comes with a kind of altered state that constantly takes different forms. It's a kind of morphing experience, but at the core of it is our true nature, is Rigpa, and that is neutral. It doesn't alter. And when that becomes the predominant feature of experiencing, yeah, of course, there's still diversity. There still can appear like states of consciousness or unfolding of awakening process, various types of experiential nuances and flavors and like complex karmic configurations. So it's not like everything becomes same in that sense. But when this neutrality or unaltered quality becomes dominant, we kind of sense that as the primary nature within all the alterations, with all this self-transforming quality of reality. And this neutrality could be also described as kind of that you're untouched, fundamentally speaking, like uncolored. Like what you are, it doesn't actually ever, is not actually affected, colored by the phenomenal alterations. And yet at the same time, there is this full expression of colors, of experiences, like kind of full immersion to reality. So when we go so close, zero distance, to these vivid rainbow-like colors, then we discover that the color is essentially empty. There is this unaltered, empty neutrality at the core of it. And what also happens here is that the distinction between pleasurable and unpleasant, it starts to collapse. That what appears in a conventional way as pleasurable, we start to discover that it's actually often a result of a heavy meaning making, that certain things appear very pleasurable. And when that meaning making deconstructs, then everything kind of becomes naturally just pleasurable. And what appears as unpleasant or even painful, when there is no more resistance to experiencing it, when these very, very complex and deeply rooted layers of resistance, they dissolve in the awakening process, then we can experience these type of sensations from a place that doesn't anymore register them as undesirable. And then they also don't appear particularly unpleasant or painful, even though we can still use those words to speak about certain type of experiences. But at the same time, it's very clear that it's just sensation. There might be intensity to it. There might be kind of fixating nature to it, but there's nothing in the direct experience itself that makes it as unpleasant. It can actually be even experienced in a kind of ecstatic manner. This type of experiences that previously appeared something to avoid. So that's kind of transformation of this aggregate into something that is called in the context of the Dhyani Buddhas, the wisdom of equanimity. And it also comes this incredible sense of generosity or kind of like overflow of reality, because we no more have this need to grasp on specific kind of experiences and strongly resist other type of experiences. And a lot of psychic energy goes into that type of struggle. And everything starts to become permeated by the sense of kind of fundamental dignity and order and coherence that we start to perceive when this pushing and pulling relaxes in our system. We can really start to appreciate reality as it is, as a kind of magnificent appearance with its innate intelligence, and see that every single experience that we could ever have is absolutely perfect. It doesn't anymore appear positive or negative in the conventional sense. Okay, and then the third aggregate, perception or sana, which refers to the capacity to organize experience in the form of labels or categories. And that is something very deeply rooted, of course, when we are living in the conventional mode of self and other. That's one of the first label that appears, that there is self and other, that there is this and that, or here and there. So reality itself is undifferentiated display, and then this categorizing makes it appear that there is, differentiation. So when this aggregate transforms through the awakening process and the realization of no self and emptiness, it transforms into the discriminating wisdom. And it's so beautiful, right? Because now perception arises as innately pure, like prior to any kind of labeling, categorizing. So we have access to this energy of beginning, this incredible freshness and beauty of the impetus of perception, before it is spoiled by conceptualization. So that's the kind of energy that a young infant experiences, or baby, right? But what makes it different in non-dual realization, that we have this capacity for discerning, discriminating. So it's not just this undifferentiated, undivided, spontaneous display, but we are able to perceive there distinct shapes, patterns, intelligence, coherence, and so it's a kind of paradox here. It's everything is very undifferentiated, and at the same time, there is this capacity to discern, to discriminate, but not in a way the ordinary mind does, through conceptualization. This, that, me, you, tree, flower, sky, like anything, like all these type of labels, they often veil the direct reality so that we perceive it through concepts in a way that is dimmed and kind of blurred, and makes the perception lose this or makes our experience of perception lose its innate vividness and beauty. And that's also a source of this type of existential alienation, where we start to feel depressed, and we disconnect from this immense vitality of the freshness of perceiving in this way, which is really natural. So yeah, in this way of perceiving, like where there is no duality, there is no functioning of the ordinary mind. We have access to kind of natural well-being, that is normally obscured by this perception aggregate, by this constant labeling, constant categorizing, conceptualization. Okay, and then the fourth aggregate, Sankara, the mental formations. So the transformation that it undergoes is quite indescribable, because this is usually the activity that binds us very intensely to craving and desire. All the stories, all the meaning making, all the self-referencing, all the narratives, volition. So usually that binds us heavily to kind of diluted existence. But when the self-grasping is thoroughly released here, this capacity for meaning becomes a creative tool. Like when we see that all reality is inherently empty of meaning, and all meaning making is fabrication, and that the experience of self was the root ignorance, the root meaning that kind of distorted the functioning of this aggregate. So when that is removed, then what appeared previously as habit, as something that limits us, becomes now an expression of pure creativity, almost like art. So we're able to use this type of creative potential of the mind in a way that is liberating and enriching, enlivening in a skillful way. That is alleviating suffering for ourselves and for others. And this is a profound transformation, because now also the so-called residues, karmic residues, or residues of trauma, or residues of the sense of self that used to be there, so to speak, when the self-construct, was still there and was binding all these interpretations into an apparently existing thing. So when that is all gone, these residues still appear, right? So awakening is not a perfected state in that sense, that all conditioning would be wiped out and all experiential residues would be just removed. But what's really beautiful here is that when the residue activates, it actually becomes a source of creativity, a source of visions, right? In Tögal practice, right? So without residues, without karmic residues, we wouldn't have material actually for this dissolution process, where the luminosity is released and where this innate clarity is kind of deepening into its own functioning, through the path. And the path is exactly our life, moment by moment, our interactions and our way of moving in the world, and the way that these remaining residues appear and disappear and self-release. It becomes a form of inspiration. Again, this may sound super, far away from your experience, or conceptual maybe, if you haven't tapped into the function of self-revelation, which becomes available when the awakening has kind of clarified and deepened, and some of these fundamental shifts have like occurred. So we start to access this capacity of self-liberation in a way that is very natural and spontaneous, like this spontaneous presence, and which allows a kind of assimilation of this type of psychic material as an expression of luminosity or light. But I wanted to still mention it because you might have had glimpses into it during the awakening process, and and maybe you have undergone non-dual awakening, and there's not so much information available about these deeper aspects of the process when we explore the terrain further, right? It's a never-ending deepening and clarification. So I wanted to mention this, and this is again based on my experience and my explorations and my understanding, and that's something that I'm constantly working on. So it's not very easy to talk about these very subtle aspects of deep realization, and I'm aware that there's always a limitation, in the language, but I find it also an interesting challenge to try to put in words some of this stuff. And what is interesting about it is that traditionally fear is seen as the fundamental poison here that is transformed into this way of direct, immediate empowered action or skillful means. Envy is also connected, to the transformation of this specific aggregate. And envy is here not understood in a conventional sense, but it's more like this movement of the mind that is constantly comparing and measuring. And I'm not going to go more into that here, but it could be something to contemplate. So envy and fear are the core material, or the raw material of confusion. When that is transmuted, that opens up into this all encompassing, accomplishing wisdom. And the fifth aggregate, so consciousness or Vijnana. So the transformation here is very much related to mind becoming very transparent and clear and pure. So it's not anymore this constant obscuration, the ordinary mind that conceals our true nature, but that it kind of relaxes into the open boundlessness. And we can see that the ordinary mind actually is nothing other than the mind, with the capital M. So it actually, there is only one mind. And even further, there is no mind. So we can have this realization of that everything is no mind and there is no mind. when this consciousness aggregate becomes very, very clear and transparent and reveals reality as a, pure, immaculate display. So it's the wisdom of reality that it's traditionally called here. And when we undergo this transformation of this fundamental ignorance, and the ignorance here is related to the mistaking of the ordinary mind as something real, or actually existing. So that's the difference between kind of consciousness and Rigpa, is that consciousness is the ordinary mind and Rigpa is the nature of the mind. And we realize Rigpa through the functioning of consciousness, through looking closely into the mind. And when we do that, we realize that there is no such thing as mind. We can't find that in the direct experience. So there appears to be this ordinary mind, but when we look for it, we can't find it. Only thing that we can ever find is a thought. And that thought becomes a portal then to the nature of the mind when it is approached skillfully. So that was just a super short simplification. And yeah, all in all, this transformation of the aggregates, it's a very powerful process, and is like specific to a tantric path. It's specific to the practice of chud as well, because chud is a kind of fusion of the wisdom of emptiness and no self, or prajnaparamita, and the tantric path, and shamanism. So yeah, we undergo this radical deconstruction, like a radical deconstruction of ego, which eventually then allows that the emptiness reveals itself as inconceivable fullness. So here, the bliss refers to not fullness, but emptiness specifically. So the fullness is the aliveness, right? It is the vibrancy and vividness, and the nuanced and distinct flavors that become ever more magnified, like through the process of awakening in all its ordinariness. So the bliss is something very different than what we would normally associate that word with, because it's exactly that emptiness that is inseparable from bliss, and we can't understand it. So usually we associate bliss with fullness, of getting something, of substance. But this is almost like that we get nothing, as a result of undergoing this insane process and this radical life-altering journey. Is like, yeah, we get nothing. We get nothing out of this enlightenment thing. Nothing is achieved. And for some reason, that very nothingness is more fulfilling than anything else. It's this neutrality, it's this radical sobriety. Okay, I hope this made some sense. This was a kind of complex and subtle subject, and it was a challenge for me to attempt to put it in words, because it's something that I'm like clarifying in my own journey at the moment. Yeah, but I hope it was inspiring for you guys.